Ooh.
And I got it.
Well, good evening, everybody. Because I'm a bit of a fill-in on the flies, I'm doing two. I'm doing a Scud pattern, and it's in the vise at the moment. And I'm also doing a CDC Sedge, which is one of those little guys there. So they're the two flies we'll tie tonight. You can also tie this same fly as an emerger, and it's just a matter of the way you dress the hook. So I've got that. And I want to also talk a little bit about how you use them, or how I use them. Right, okay. For the, we'll start off with the Scud. So for the Scud, you use a hook. I'll put this in the vise and then show you the packet. That'll work better. So the hook that I'm using is that one there, and it's similar to the clink hammer or kink hammer or whatever it's called. And there are a couple of varieties of it. The difference is that you want a hook, because I've been bending standard 230s, but it doesn't work with this, because what you need is you need the bite of the hook to be as big as possible, because by the time you tie the fly, then the bite of the hook, it fills up with the legs of the Scud. And I would think that there's not enough to hook the fish, which is why I've gone for the wider gap. So that's that. Okay.
Is the Hanek heavy wire, or the hens, or the is there heavy or mid strength wire?
They're both pretty well the same. The difference is that this is a Hanek 530, which is what I'm using. Now the kink hammer, which is this one here, right?
Yeah. The
bite of the hook is too narrow. It narrows at that point there, which I see as a handicap. So that's what I haven't done that. Okay, so that's that. Now, while I'm doing this, I'll just talk about, there's a few of us went to Tasmania earlier this year, which was fantastic, I have to add. And Bernie, Richard, and I fished a place called Lake Kay, which is just one of the most beautiful lakes, in my opinion, up there. And we fished all day, cast our arms off, never caught a fish. And there was no insect life. And we were there early, but there was no insect life at all. And I came up with a theory that, the fish were there, but they weren't feeding on what we were casting at them, what the fly choice we were doing. And we all had chosen different flies, but we just weren't getting a take. Now, if you take a difference between the Goulburn River, now there would be no Scud in the Goulburn River. It's a fast-flowing river, limited weed growth, gets flushed out, okay? But in a lake where you have lots of weed growth and relatively still water, the Scud are the garbage cleaners. You know, they're the ones that any dead insect that sinks to the bottom, it comes and eats them up. And they're just a little crustacean. And I believe that if we, on that particular day, if we had fished with a Scud pattern, we might have had more success, because the fish are feeding on something. They just weren't feeding on terrestrials and insects and the other type of flies that we were casting at them. So that's where the Scud pattern, because I did some research and came back to it, and since then I've talked to a number of people, including Joe from Aussie Angler, and she's saying, "Oh yeah, when there's no bugs around, you got to find something else that they're feeding on, and it's probably Scud." So, hence the Scud flies. Does anybody else fish with Scuds?
Don't fish with them, Baz, but when we were wandering around the side of Little Pine, we met one of the local blokes there who catches and keeps a few fish. and we were getting nothing. Fish were moving a little bit, but not much. And when he gutted these fish, they were full of scud,
Right.
literally full of them.
Right. So that proves the point is that
Yep.
the fish would prefer to eat a mayfly or whatever, right? But if they're not there and the air is clear and there's nothing around, they're not going to go hungry. They'll eat whatever is there, and hence the scud pattern.
Yeah.
Now, scuds can be done in all sorts of different ways. So I've got.
Baz, you just want to talk us through what you've done to prepare that?
Yeah, I'll talk that in a minute. Just
Okay,
I want to set the scene a bit, if you like.
Okay.
So they're the scuds in the top. I'm not sure what it is. It's left to me. I don't know if it's left or right to you. But you can see the different varieties that you can tie it on by just choosing different colours and different lengths. Joe says that Joe from Aussie Angler says that she always ties them on a 14. I'm tying these on a 12, really because the 14 is a bit small for, to demonstrate how to tie it. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken the hook and I've wrapped lead wire around the hook, and as many times as whatever you want to do, okay, because scud are on the bottom of the, they're down on the bottom of the system, so you need this thing to sink. So it depends on how much you do. I've done, about 6 wraps of lead on there. And I've just positioned the lead wire basically central on the sort of hump of the hook. And now I've wound thread in the front from the eye all the way back, and then in through the gaps of the lead to keep the lead solid in one place. I don't want it to slide up and down the hook. And I'm just going to continue to wrap that down. There's been a bit of that lead down there. And I am going to go down about halfway down the bend of the hook to about there. And I do want to create a bit of a taper so that the bump caused by the lead is reduced. Now you do want to keep enough room between the lead wire and the eye of the hook. Otherwise, it's very easy to crowd the eye too much, which is not a good thing. Okay. Right. So we've done that. Done the lead wire. Now, there's lots of ways you can. What you want to do is that you want to put a shiny or a clear back over the top of the fly when you tie it. So if I grab the one that I've already tied and you look at that, you can see it's got a back on it. Now you can make the back out of lots of things. You could use thin skin. What I've done is I've grabbed a Ziploc bag and I've cut some strips off that. You probably can't see it, but believe me, there's strips of plastic bag.
Yeah, that's coming out easy. That's good. See that easy.
Okay, right, okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to tie this in at the back here. And then after we've basically formed the body and the legs, we're going to fold this back over the top. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I'll just put the wire on first so I don't forget. Those little bits of plastic stick to your fingers. Now the wire is going to be used to wrap around the body over the top of the skin that you put over to form the segments of the body, okay? Now, there's different sites of wire. Here I'm using a medium wire, which is reasonably heavy. Often what I'll do is I'll use a much lighter one like that, but it's too hard to demonstrate. So I'm just going to tie this one using this. And you want to tie that firm securely because you're going to pull it very hard. And you now want to tie that firmly to the body of the fly. And after Bill made adverse comments about my haircut the other day, I actually found someone to give me a haircut. So I've just had a haircut. Colin hasn't, I can tell. Right, that's our wire in. Now we're going to get our plastic. Now, what's a good idea when you, doesn't matter what you use, because you can buy a Scud back, which is a thicker plastic, but it's the same sort of thing. But it's very important that when you tie this on, that it is central to the top of the fly. Now, a good trick to do is you cut a taper on the plastic. So you've got form a little bit like a bit of an arrowhead, not a sharp arrow, but a blunt arrowhead. So does that show up?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So then you use that to position onto the hook. And you basically tie it into position. We want that to sit like that, which it is. Now, it's very important the order you tie it in. You should tie the copper in first, or the mono, or whatever you're going to use to wrap the body, and then you put the skin over the top. Don't do it the other way around. Makes life very difficult for you. Now, to form the body, there's two ways to do it. One is you can use a dubbing like a crystal flash dubbing, and it's got quite long fibers in it, because what you can do is you can dub that and then you comb it out to form the legs. But a way that I've worked out to do it, which is much simpler, is you use long-legged chenille.
Ah, good idea.
And this is, I think it's 5 mil. So it's 5 mil long. So the little legs on it are 5 mil long. And it works really well. And it's a lot easier to do. You just strip the end back so that you've got a bit of thread sticking out the end. Now, it's important that you tie this all the way back, because you want the legs, because we're going to comb this out to form the legs. And we want the legs to start right at the back of the body. So I'm just doing a rough tie in here, and then so I've got this started right at the back, and I'm just going to secure it on and get my body looking really neat. Now, at this point, what's a good idea to do is to do just a 1/2 inch to hold that there while you pull everything into line. So I'm just going to put a 1/2 inch on there, pull that back there. Now this wraps opposite way to the thread. So we go around that way. Now we want the little fibers on here are going to act as like the tail of it. So we want to make sure this is right towards the hook. And then we just wrap round a few times to create the effect of the body of the thing. Just done that. And the head generally works out pretty good, so that's okay there. I'm just going to wrap this up. My vise at a different height makes it hard.
Is it higher or lower than you normally have, Barry?
It's much lower.
Okay.
So the desk is that's these little hurdles, aren't they? Just hurdles, aren't they?
It's interesting what you get used to, though.
Yeah, it is. Well, this is my new vise. My old saltwater vise is been consigned to the spare parts box.
That's a Renzetti Traveller. Is it?
No,
It's the one from Flyvids.
yeah, it's one of Jim's.
Yeah, yeah. And I checked, it hasn't got plastic screws in it. They're all metal. So I did check after your note. I checked that. Now the top of this, it's a lot easier if you trim basically the fur off the top, because we don't want it there. So we'll just trim that off. Just on the top. Be careful not to cut the plastic off. That'd be a problem. Okay, so we've got that. Now it's just a matter now of pulling the plastic over the top, making sure it stays on the top.
Harry, how wide is your strip of plastic?
Okay, so when you buy
4
the
inches.
Scud back, it's 1/4 inch. Now that's a little bit too wide. So I've cut this at around about 4. So a little bit narrower than the one you buy. I've got some Scud back here, but
Is that
So that's-
4
what you buy.
millimeter? You're talking
That's
about
what you
4
buy.
millimeter?
Quarter.
yes, sorry, I am. Yes. So that's the Scud back you buy. It's a little
Which
bit
is
thicker.
1/4 inch, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think 4 mils a bit less, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, 6.35 mil.
Oh,
Yeah,
God
quarter inch.
almighty.
Thanks.
Yeah, just to be specific.
Right.
I'm
The
sure,
Irish
that,
have
I'm
always
sure the
been
fish are
known
going to
to
measure it before they take it.
Oh yeah, totally.
The Irish
Because-
have always been known for their scientific accuracy.
Oh yeah. I'll take a foot, take a yard.
Yeah.
Hey, what size hook are you using? Sorry, I might have missed that.
Oh, it was size 12, wasn't it, Barry? Just for this example, was it?
Yeah, so generally the experts are saying that should be tied on a 14.
Okay.
And it's very important that the hook, because you've just come in, so that's the hook I'm using. Now it's very important if you use a clink hammer hook, the bite of the hook is less than these.
Yeah.
So I've got the clink hammer one there. So this one here, I don't recommend, because the
Just
hook
hold them back
curves up.
away from the camera a bit, would you, Barry? And then we can see it, what
That's
it
it.
says.
Perfect.
That's better, yeah.
Okay, because I haven't got another camera. I've only got a little picture at the top of the screen, so forgive me. But you can see that okay?
Yeah.
This one here, don't use. I don't suggest you use it. I recommend this one here.
The big gape.
Slightly bigger gape. Yep. Right. Okay. So now we've got the plastic shield pulled over the top. And I'm now going to cut off the excess without cutting the thread. It's always a good idea. And now I can pull the wire up. I'm going to pull the wire up and wind it the same way as I did the chenille. Now you need to get this quite tight. So once you've got it started and you know where you're going, you pull it and it beds down and forms the segments of the body. Now you don't want too many wraps. And you can see what I mean. If you used a lighter gauge wire, then it gives you a better effect. That's what I mean about creating the eye of the hook. Right. Every time I see you tying a fly bunny, I see you doing that little helicopter thing and think, oh, gee, I wish I could do that. So there's basically our fly. And just a whip finish to finish. So I'm going to whip finish it. Now I am going to resin this, so just one finish like that is all I need. Okay, so that basically has formed the fly. Now, that tool there, can you see that? It's just a brush. Right, now what we're going to do is we're going to brush this out. And what it's doing is it's forming the legs. And the tail. And I've left a little bit hanging off the end of the eye, which sort of looks like the head. When we put the resin on, that's a problem. So what I do is I put a bobbin into the eye, and I leave that in there.
Very good.
Yeah, there's so I've got quite a few different types of resin here. This is thick resin. Now you can buy this as thick or thin. You want thick, because what you have to do, just position this in the vise a little bit like that. Because what you want to do is you want it to stay there, because you just want to form a shell on the top of the fly. The bottle's nearly empty. Yeah. Did anyone else use this loon resin?
I don't use loon.
Yes, Barry. Yep.
Yeah, I've got some,
Okay.
but it's always so hard to get out of the bottle in the small ones.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's what I've got. And the other thing, it doesn't dry hard. It's still tacky.
Yeah.
So what you do is when you've tied them, stick it on a board and leave them out in the sun for the day. And they do harden up quite a bit. So what I've done there is I've just, So what I've done there is I've basically just put a coat over the top of the plastic to form the outer shell. And as soon as the trout bites it, he's going to realise, oi, this is not a scud. So you need to set the hook. So we're just putting a hard back on it, and then we clean it up with the scissors and make the legs and everything else. Can everyone see that okay? See what I'm doing? Yeah. And then what I do is I use the thin resin to just coat around my whipping on the end. So it doesn't come undone. And that's pretty well, just trim it up now and it's finished. Okay, so underneath, I just trim it back to about the top of the hook. And there's our little scud pattern.
You put your orders in now because Barry's got nothing else to do. So Just tell him how you a couple of dozen of those, and
Boom.
Right. So you go, now I've tied them using different materials. So I've got some pink chenille, which is similar. I've done a couple of dubbing ones, but they're very hard to get the dubbing right. But you can do them. But yeah, I mean, because that looks pretty much like the pictures of a scud. But Joe from Aussie Angler says, yeah, tie 'em on a 14. This is a 12. And that's it done.
Barry, are the fibres beyond the gape?
No, I cut them back. I cut them back so they're level with the gape.
Okay.
And that's why that gape of the hook is, in my opinion, quite important. Because when the fish inhales it, you want that hook to have every opportunity to grab on something inside its mouth.
Yeah.
Because they just wolf those down. I mean, yeah.
What colour thread were you using, Barry?
I am using flat wax nylon thread. I've lost my.
No, we can see it.
Can you see it?
Yeah. And
Okay.
what colour? What colour is it? Sort of green.
Yeah, it's an olivey colour. So I've made those as an olivey colour, and so I've used olive thread.
Do they come in colours?
Say again?
Do they come in other colours? Scuds?
Yeah, they do. So in the book, but they're always an olive or, believe it or not, a pink. But you need to use, if you use pink chenille to wrap the body, then you should use an olivey coloured skin over the top.
Okay.
So which you could just get a texture and colour it. Yeah.
Thank you.
In fact, I've got some I've done in different colours. That second row down, if you can see that second row down is different colours.
Yeah, you got
Yep.
some black and some pink ones there.
Barry, where do you get the chenille from?
I got it from Flyvins.
Oh, okay.
I might find the packet here. There we go.
I just wondered whether it was Lincraft.
Well, it would be if they were bloody open.
No, Jim sells it.
Another one. to
Yeah,
use
correct.
for- he does, yeah. Another one for Scud legs is ostrich hurl, and you can sweep it down as well and resin across it.
Okay, yeah.
That's for some of your Scud patterns, you can do that as well. Not that I've
I've
tied
seen-
any, but I've seen it.
I've seen some tied on YouTube, where they use, instead of using a hard body resin, they're using a silicon. And, it's quite a precise art to get this. And then what they do is they sweep the silicon down the sides to stiffen those outside legs up. But using the chenille, you don't need to do that. Well, that's what I thought. So,
Barry, I did a little promo and put it on our team app about tonight, and I thought I'd better put a scud up there and a demonstration of how not to tie them. So thank you for that. That's given me a lot of clues on it.
okay. Oh, it's good. Okay.
And Barry, what sort of retrieve are you using with these patterns? Usually.
Well, the scud, they basically sit, so they're like a lice, or because they're garbage cleaners, right? And so what they'll do is they very slowly, because they don't have fins or anything else, they've just got those little legs, and those little legs, are going like that, so that it's a very slow movement, and it is a bit of a jerky movement. So these will, depending on how much lead and how deep the water is, these will go right down to the bottom, and it should be round the edges of the weeds and everything else. And then it's just a very slow pull, stop, pull, jerk, stop, pull. Yeah. So if you see, I've watched a few videos of scud and tanks, and you see how they move. And I was there. So that's what I base that on.
Mhm.
Okay. We done with scuds?
So we're going to have tons of them for Tassie for the round 2 trip, is it?
Yeah. Well, I've done there's about, I don't know, half a dozen or so there, more there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we found out that Scud information on the boat on the way back. Not on the way to. That's like, oh, it's good. All right, yeah, cool. Try the
Bernie,
next.
don't forget the scud. They were late feeding on scud, though. Normally they wouldn't be feeding on scud at that time of the year when we were there. It was to do with the La Nina summer.
All right.
I mean, there were no bugs in the air at all. I mean,
That's right. Yeah.
I fished with Richard twice in Lake Cay. The first morning we got there, we were there before the sun came up.
Beautiful.
And there were no insects. There was not even there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. And the fish, when we got there, we spooked a couple of fish, and they were feeding in, like 4 inches of water, right in the roots of the tussock that grows down on the side. So they were feeding on scud for sure. Yeah,
That's right.
It's just
Yeah.
that we weren't bright enough at that time to work it out.
Yeah. Well, I guess
take them.
Say again?
I said the key word
Caddis.
that we heard from the locals was that they were still feeding on scuds, and they shouldn't have been. They should have finished back in February.
I didn't have any scud pattern flies in there, so it wouldn't make a difference if I had enough. Okay, right. So the next one is there's a couple of ways we can do these. So so what we're going to do is there's a couple of ways you can tie a fly. So I was watching a video on flies that are dry flies, okay, but the wing will sit above the water, but the body and the hook of the fly will sit in that film immediately underneath. Now, a typical emerger, as such, he will sit there with his wing out, but his body in the water, which is why you tie an emerger, which is why they tie like things like the parachutes and that sort of thing. So they're designed to hold the head of the fly up and have the tail hanging down. Now, there's a couple of ways you can accentuate that. And what I've got here is these are hooks that I prepared before. I'm not sure if you can see them, but we'll try. So what I've done here is I've taken, these are 10s, but normally they'll be on a smaller hook. And what I've done on these is I've wrapped the hook to just below the bend, just at the start of the bend in cotton. And then I've tied in some attractor. In this case, I've just used foil. And then I've counterwound the foil up over the cotton. And then I've coated the whole thing in resin and let it cure. And so what you've got is you've got the backside of the fly, which will hang because the resin it doesn't float, so it will make that hook down. And all you need to do now is to tie a wing on it to allow it to float. And to do that, I'm just going to use CDC, and I've tied a couple of different, as a preparation for this.
Barry,
yep.
question. When you say foil, what type of foil is it?
Right, okay.
I'm
So
thinking aluminium foil, but it won't be, probably.
So this comes from my old saltwater days.
Okay.
I'm not sure how well you can see it, but it's a relatively thin foil, which has got, all of the different colors in it. Can you see that? Like a tinsel. Yeah, it is like a tinsel. And it just comes on a reel. Sorry, the label's gone off it. And you can buy it in different widths. I've had this for years. It's
holographic tinsel.
Yeah, okay. Here's a new one. It's still got the label on it. So this one is much thicker. So it's much wider, which I think is too much, but yeah, whatever you feel. See that? And there's, you know, there's mylars you can get, which are goldy coloured mylars. You can use one which I've found really good is that you get red wire, and I don't have any left, but you use red wire. So you again wrap it with black cotton, and then with that really thin wire you can get. I know this one. This is really thin wire. This is black. That gives you an idea. I know it's black. Yeah, okay. But you can get that in red, and it's really thin. It's like cotton. And you wrap that round, and that creates a good effect as well. Because what you want to do is you want to create enough weight so that it pulls the backside of the fly down, and then the fly is just supported by the wing, the CDC wing that you tie on top. And then so once you're prepared, because you need to tie the bodies like a day before to allow the resin to fully cure before you tie the wing on it. Otherwise the wing sticks to the resin. And what I'm going to do here, I've just got CDC, and all I do is just get a number of feathers and make sure the tips are all lined up. And you don't have to use white. You could use a mixture of white, and I've got some white ones and some orange ones, and that works quite well. And so I end up with a clump like so. And what I'm going to do is just wet my fingers and pull that into line. And I want this, because this wing is going to sit sort of like that. And so I haven't started my thread. So I've got my CDC. Interesting what you do in lockdown, isn't it? Because I was home most of this week and last week, and nothing else to do except think, I wonder how this works. I wonder what that does. I've been doing an exercise on floatants and everything else. And one of the things that I really, CDC is a wonderful material for dry flies, but the thing is you can't use the normal gel style floatants on them. It doesn't work. So if you do put gink or any of those on the CDC fly, it just becomes a solid mass of gink, and it just sinks like a stone. So you need to use, you've got to do something different. And so I've been doing a bit of work. I don't know what, does anyone have tried the powders, the shakes, you know, the other varieties of floatants around? Does anyone condition their flies after they've tied them?
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I tend to use powder on them.
Well, the powder are mostly a desiccant, and so desiccant is just a dryer. And so while you're fishing, you know, you can use the rubber band trick to dry the flies and to shake a lot of the water out, and then you can use the desiccant because it will dry it out. But there are products around that are conditioners, and what they do is they pre-treat the flies after you've tied them before you put them in the water. And what they do is they put basically a layer on the fibers of the feathers, which will stay there. Well, it won't stay there forever, but it will condition the fly so that when it will help to resist the water, because the whole point of CDC is that it is extremely buoyant.
So that might be something like, yeah, it's probably right out of left field, but Scotch Guard, it does similar sort of thing, you know, that you do to repel the wetness off some of your furniture.
Okay, well, a lot of those are silicon based.
Oh, okay.
And you don't want to use silicon. You don't want to use silicon. So there are, and I've been doing the research in the last couple of days, and there are products around. The other thing too is that you can buy little pouches which have a special type of leather in them, and they're super absorbent. And all you do is you put your fly into the leather pouch and squeeze it down, right? Give it a good squeeze, and the leather will actually suck out the majority of the water that's in it, ready for you to fish again. Because as soon as the flies become saturated with water, they sink. Well, and they're not a dry fly anymore. They don't work. Yeah.
I've got a little patch of chamois that I've clipped off a car chamois and just hangs on the front of my vest.
Yep.
That works. Barry, you mentioned the special little trick with a rubber band. Some people may not know that. Do you want to describe that one?
Okay, so all you do is just get a rubber band that's 3-4 inches long and tie it onto your vest somewhere. And all you do is you just hook the fly. So you've got one end of the rubber band hooked onto your vest, and you hook the hook of the fly over it, and then you just ping the rubber band.
Yeah.
And the vibration of the rubber band will shake a lot of the water or gunk or whatever it is out of the fly.
Thank you. It's very effective.
Yeah, it is.
That's great. Yeah, what a beauty.
Yeah, and not very expensive either. Okay, so I've got this clump of CDC here, and I want it to be about as long as I tend to tie these in a little bit too long and then pull them back. I don't want to crowd the eye too much. And there's my hunk of CDC. I'll just cut that off. You can actually, the CDC that, like I've got 3 feathers here, and CDC is not cheap.
Baller.
Cut that out from there. Now, if you save these and just cut the fibers off the stem and save it, it makes really good dubbing. And it's easy to dub.
And that's the three tips you've put there, Barry, isn't it?
Yes, just 3 tips.
Would you also be able to strip like a hackle feather and bunch it into one, so you're not wasting 3 feathers, or does it have to be the tips? I'm a miserable bastard when it comes to getting rid of CDC.
You could. I only want the CDC to end up on the top of the hook. I don't want any underneath.
Yeah, gotcha.
So you could use it like a dubbing. So you could, you could dub the CDC on. You don't want the stems. So the thicker stems that are further down, you don't want those. And I'm just trimming up those ends that I don't want. If I can do that without cutting my bloody feather off.
Just thrown a couple of links into the chat to the CDC oil that I use on all my CDC dries.
Yeah.
And the fly dryer, which is, I don't know, Amadou or something like, no, it's like, the material that you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's kind of like a suede sort of stuff.
That's right. That's the leather, yeah.
Yeah.
They're super. Yeah. They're really good. And you can buy them. I had a look around. There's quite a few shops have got them. Yeah, especially the Essential Fly Fisher and Tassie. They've got them.
Yeah, you don't need, like I've got a patch that's, probably 6 or 7 centimeters long.
Yeah.
By 3 or 4 wide. And I just squeeze the fly in between it.
Are you, Paul, are you talking about those microfiber towels?
No, it's
No, it's a special leather.
Okay.
I'll take it off pack and I'll show you.
I use the microfiber towel.
It won't get rid of enough water. They don't get rid of enough.
Fungus is Amadou.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know whether you can see that.
I got the leather there.
Right, it's basically just a
You
little
squeeze
patch
it
like
between.
that, and I just tuck the fly in the middle and squash it in there,
Yeah.
and it takes all of the moisture out of it. You've still got to sort of blow the fly a bit and dry it off, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's nice and small and just attaches to my chest pack. And the
I think
oil works really well to keep them floating too.
Yeah. You need to do that. I think it's it's something you really need to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so
no, they'll sink if you don't oil them up.
Well, if they sink, then they're not much use.
No.
So what I'm doing now is I'm going to pull this up like a little parachute. And so what I've done is I've gone around the front, and now I'm just going to pull this forward, and just like when you tie a parachute. Just going to pull this around. You notice I haven't cut these and I'm not going to cut these. So what I've got is so I'm just going to pull those around to let them stand up. And they're pretty well there. Now it's just a whip finish. You can do a little bit of dubbing around the front. If you find you've tied your wing too far back, you can put a bit of dubbing there to hide it. But in this case, I don't think we need to do that. Now you can fish these as a subsurface fish, a subsurface fly, or as an emerger, because I think they work equally well. But I think I've had more success with these as an emerger than I have as a surface fly. And the difference is that if I was going to tie this as a sedge, as such, then what I would do is I would dub the body and then put a wing on it, just similar to that. And there's your little CDC emerger.
Looks great.
Good stuff, Barry.
Oh,
Any questions, guys? You're all on mute, by the way. I've muted you all.
That's why there's no questions.
Neil told me to do that, so blame Neil.
It looks good.
I think one of the things that I have learned a lot by doing research into how to effectively dry a fly, and gink is really effective on deer's hair or hackle, but only the heavy hackles. But but any of the finer components that you tie the fly with, don't use gink. Yeah, use something else.
Yeah, looking at Fly Fisher, they've got Pathogen CDC oil, $25 for a little small little drum of it.
Yeah, essential fly fishing seem to have the best. Aussie Angler have got a few products there, but I thought Essential Fly Fishers had a much better range. Because I don't know how many people are aware that, because I know in the past, whenever the fly sinks, I put a bit of gink on it and keep going. And some of them don't float that well after a while. And as soon as they stop floating, well, stop fishing. They don't work.
Barry, just a question about the floatability of CDC, and Tony and Paul and others who know this. My experience is when you catch a fish on that and the slime gets on them, you may as well just change your fly. I've never been able to dry it out properly after catching a fish and in the mouth. Any ideas on that?
Yeah, I give them a good dunk in the river.
Yep.
And then whack them in between that
patch.
That patch, and that'll suck all the moisture out of it. And then, you know, give them a bit of a whip around with some false casts, and then I'll put a little bit more of the CDC oil, and I only tend to put the oil or drip it into the body of the fly, not into the dry or the fluffy feathers. And let it sink in, and then give it a touch with my fingers, and then only have a really small amount that I'll put onto the feathers themselves, and I'm right to go again usually.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. Paul, do you think that some of the research I did, the work that you do in conditioning the fly as you've tied it, is conditioning the fly makes a massive difference to how the fly will perform from then on, even though you dry it properly and you do use the oil or the desiccant or whatever you use. It's the conditioning of the fly from the beginning that determines.
Yeah, I tried that early on. I can't remember whether I did it with CDCs. It was more other dries, I think. And I had this stuff, but it just smelt horrendous. So I kind of gave up on it after a while. You dip the fly in it and then just take the fly away and let it dry out.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it smelt like it had been in a drum of petrol.
I think the other thing we do is start up a conversation on the TMAP on it, and we'll see what other ideas people have.
Yeah, so I after that, I never really did it. I never really tried it again. Yeah, so I haven't bothered, Barry. But you know, you're probably right. There's probably something out there that'll do it.
Well, it's been interesting because as I've talked to people, especially over this week, and I've talked to them about it and said, well, you know, what do you have and what do you recommend as condition? They all say the difference between a fly that really works well and a fly that's pretty average is the conditioning of the fly after it's been tied.
Yeah. So what were they recommending?
Sorry?
Do you know, like what was the stuff that they were recommending? I'm trying to find the one that I used. I can't find it. Yeah.
So in YouTube, I typed in CDC fly floatant, and I got some really good hits on that search, that set of words, and I got some really interesting videos from people. I mean, a lot of it was just crap, but there was some very good people that came up. There was one older guy, English guy, and he had it nailed. Yeah. So he had a product. I have no idea if that product's even available here, but the general theme is you need to condition the fly after you've tied it.
That powder they used to get, I haven't used it for a long time, but you just put it in this bottle that had the powder, and you give that a bit of a shake.
Yeah.
That seemed to take all the moisture right out of it. But I haven't used it for years.
Yeah, well, that's basically desiccant. There's a couple of different types of desiccant, but I think it's called hydrophobic. I think the word is, and that, you know, what that does is the powder is a desiccant, and it just sucks moisture, and it just pulls the moisture out of the fly. Yeah, so while you're fishing and it's been conditioned, then and after you've, you know, used something to clean the fly, to dry most of the moisture out of the fly, that will take all the moisture away, and then you can carry on fishing.
The stuff I'm thinking of is actually called Flyagra. I kid you not, that's what its name was. Like, it worked really well, but it made the flies really smell terrible, and I kind of thought that can't be good for fishing if it smells that badly.
No, well, some of those are solvent based.
Yeah. Oh, so, no, yeah, it was. I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
No, so yeah, but there are other products around that are not solvent based. I think the point I'm trying to make is that I think, I mean, I need to do a lot more research on it to find out that there are products around that are fly conditioners. And I think particularly with CDC flies, where you do want them to sit, you know, high in the water column, I think that it's a good idea. That's what I think. Yeah.
Bill, you raised an interesting thing, and maybe others might know about it, but not particularly with the CDC, but Scotchgard. Does anyone use Scotchgard as a floatant? It's pretty cheap by comparison to floatants you buy.
Yeah.
It's the size of the tubes is a problem.
Tubes. No, Barry was talking about conditioning it prior to taking it out.
Yeah,
Fishing, that's when you would perhaps use it, but I don't know whether it's silicon based or not. I'm not sure.
No, they are. All those products are silicon based.
Are they? Yeah.
So if you put silicon, if you look at the small fibers in the CDC fly, if you put silicon on that, well, throw it in the bin.
Yeah, no, Baz, it wasn't so much about the CDC stuff. It was for, let's say, other flies.
Yeah.
Never
What's the name of the one we use?
Gink.
Gink. Yeah, that's silicon. That's
Is
just
it?
silicon paste. Yeah. It's silicon and Vaseline.
There you go.
I use Scotchgard when I'm cleaning the fly line.
Do you?
No, don't use any silicon base to clean the fly
No?
line. No, there's products you can get. I've got one out there. It's a vinyl thing you get from a car place, Autobarn, and it's got no silicon in it. Don't use a silicon based.
Okay.
Yeah, anything with silicone will eat plastic or resin.
Yeah, correct.
It's brutal stuff.
No, I'm in the coating business, and I tell you what, people who buy products and put them on timber or whatever it is, and then come along and expect some other product. Once you put silicon on,
You can't
on
do.
an absorbent material, that's it forever. You can't do anything else with it.
You can't
It's done.
paint it. You can't do anything to
You
it.
can't sand it. You can't do it. It's done. It's done. Yeah.
There's a couple of floating, like Duff have a duck floating out. That's a new product, and they've also got a CDC floating out. So there is a couple of products out there coming, because CDC is very in vogue at the moment. Yeah, there you go. That's mine.
All right. Is there any other questions about the fly tying? Because what I'll do is I'll stop the recording.
Okay, Bill.